Victoria Hayes believed she could measure a guest's worth with a single glance. She had no idea that the quiet young woman standing before her was about to become the lesson her entire career would be remembered for. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe dignity should never depend on appearances, hit like and subscribe. Stories like this remind us why respect matters. Now, back to Emily Carter. The revolving glass doors of the Lexington Crown Hotel turned silently beneath the warm afternoon sun, welcoming celebrities, executives, diplomats, and wealthy travelers into one of New York's most prestigious landmarks. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above polished marble floors, casting golden reflections across towering columns and elegant floral arrangements. Every detail whispered exclusivity. Every employee moved with rehearsed precision, trained to recognize influence before a single word was spoken. Emily Carter stepped inside carrying nothing more than a modest navy suitcase and a weathered leather shoulder bag. At 25, she looked more like a graduate student returning from a weekend trip than someone accustomed to luxury hotels. She wore a simple white blouse beneath a light gray cardigan, dark jeans, comfortable sneakers, and almost no jewelry except for a slim silver watch resting quietly against her wrist. Several guests barely noticed her. Others noticed just enough to dismiss her. Emily paused for a moment near the entrance, taking in the grand lobby with calm appreciation. The enormous chandelier reflected softly in her blue eyes as a pianist performed gentle melodies from the corner lounge. She smiled almost imperceptibly. Long weeks of non-stop meetings, investor presentations, and cross-country flights had left little room for silence. This hotel was supposed to offer exactly that. She approached the reception desk with steady confidence. Behind it stood Victoria Hayes, the hotel's front office manager. Impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit accented by a gold name badge, Victoria had spent nearly 15 years mastering the subtle art of reading people. At least, she believed she had. One glance toward Emily's casual clothing was enough for her mind to finish a story that had never actually begun. Another traveler who wanted photographs in the lobby. Another guest who would eventually ask for the cheapest available room. Victoria's practiced smile appeared, flawless but distant. "Good afternoon," she greeted politely. "How may I assist you today?" Emily returned the smile with quiet warmth. "I have a reservation for the presidential suite." For the briefest second, time seemed to hesitate. Victoria blinked once before checking the computer screen, though her fingers barely touched the keyboard. Her smile remained, but something colder settled behind it. "The presidential suite?" she repeated gently, as though confirming she had heard correctly. "Yes," Emily answered. "It should be under Emily Carter." Victoria finally typed the name. A reservation appeared immediately, highlighted with several confidential notes that required executive authorization. Instead of reading further, her eyes drifted back toward Emily's cardigan, inexpensive suitcase, and worn sneakers. Her expression hardened almost invisibly. Nearby guests continued chatting beneath the sparkling chandeliers, unaware that the smallest decision could sometimes change far more than a single reservation. Across the lobby, a bellman glanced toward the front desk after noticing Victoria's unusually rigid posture. Another receptionist quietly looked away, sensing the atmosphere shift. Emily remained composed, patiently waiting. She had faced boardrooms worth billions of dollars without raising her voice. She certainly wasn't about to lose her dignity over a hotel check-in. What she didn't know was that somewhere beyond the hotel's private entrance, a convoy of black luxury vehicles had just turned onto the driveway. And inside the lobby, Victoria Hayes was only seconds away from making the biggest mistake of her professional life. Victoria Hayes folded her hands neatly across the polished marble reception counter, her flawless smile never quite reaching her eyes. Years of working at the Lexington Crown Hotel had convinced her that wealth announced itself. Long before a guest ever spoke, it appeared in tailored suits, luxury watches, designer handbags, private chauffeurs, and the effortless confidence that came with belonging among the elite. The young woman standing before her matched none of those expectations. "I'm sorry," Victoria said pleasantly, her voice carrying just enough warmth to sound professional. "There seems to be a discrepancy." Emily Carter waited patiently. "What kind of discrepancy?" Victoria glanced briefly at the reservation before closing the screen altogether. The presidential suite is reserved exclusively for our most distinguished guests. I'm afraid there may have been an error during the booking process. Emily's expression remained calm. I booked it directly through your executive reservations office. Victoria tilted her head slightly. I understand. The words sounded polite. The meaning was not. Behind Emily, another guest quietly paused while waiting for the concierge. A businessman lowered his newspaper just enough to observe the conversation. Luxury hotels often attracted curiosity whenever someone appeared out of place. Victoria continued speaking in the measured tone she had perfected over countless years. May I ask which company you're traveling with? I'm here on business. And which organization would that be? Emily smiled gently. I don't think that's necessary. My reservation should contain everything you need. Something about the answer irritated Victoria. Guests who truly belonged here rarely needed to explain themselves. Yet they also never looked like they had stepped off a public subway carrying an inexpensive suitcase. Victoria leaned forward slightly. Miss Carter, perhaps another room category would be more suitable. Emily blinked once. I specifically reserved the presidential suite. I'm aware. Another pause. I'm simply suggesting an alternative that may better accommodate your situation. The sentence landed softly. Its humiliation did not. Emily could already feel nearby conversations beginning to fade. Human curiosity was predictable. Expensive places always seemed to magnify uncomfortable moments. She refused to let embarrassment show. I believe. There has been a misunderstanding. Victoria's smile finally disappeared. No, Miss Carter. Her voice became slightly louder. I believe the misunderstanding is yours. Several heads turned. The pianist continued playing, but the elegant melody suddenly felt distant beneath the growing tension. The presidential suite costs nearly $18,000 per night. Victoria allowed the number to linger in the air. It is generally reserved months in advance by heads of state, Fortune 500 executives, foreign dignitaries, and members of our private ownership circle. Her eyes drifted deliberately toward Emily's sneakers. I would hate for you to place yourself in an uncomfortable financial situation. A faint murmur spread across the lobby. One elderly couple exchanged glances. A young receptionist looked down at her keyboard, pretending not to hear. Emily slowly inhaled. I've already paid the required deposit. Victoria gave a quiet laugh. I'm sure you believe you have. For the first time, genuine silence settled across the reception area. Emily noticed it immediately. Not the silence of peace. The silence that arrives just before public humiliation. She could have opened her phone. She could have displayed the confirmation email. She could have identified herself as the founder and CEO whose company had recently dominated financial headlines. Instead, she simply rested both hands on her suitcase handle. I'd appreciate it if you would verify the reservation one more time. Victoria straightened her jacket. I already have. Then, with perfect composure, she pressed a discreet button beneath the reception desk. Across the lobby, one of the hotel's security supervisors looked toward the front counter before beginning to walk in their direction. Emily followed his movement with quiet eyes. She still said nothing. Outside, beyond the towering glass entrance, 3 identical black luxury sedans rolled silently beneath the hotel's grand porte-cochere. None of the guests noticed them. Neither did Victoria. But within minutes, every confident assumption she had built her reputation upon would begin collapsing one quiet sentence at a time. The security supervisor reached the reception desk with calm, measured steps, his polished shoes barely making a sound against the marble floor. His name tag read Daniel Brooks, and unlike the growing crowd around him, he hadn't yet formed an opinion about the young woman standing quietly beside her suitcase. Is there a problem, Ms. Hayes? He asked. Victoria never looked away from Emily. I believe we've encountered someone attempting to access accommodations that don't belong to her. The sentence was carefully chosen. Not an accusation. Not yet. Just enough to make everyone nearby wonder. Daniel turned politely toward Emily. Ma'am, may I ask if everything is all right? Emily met his eyes with the same calm expression she had worn since entering the lobby. I reserved the presidential suite. Ms. Hayes believes the reservation isn't appropriate for me. Daniel hesitated. He had worked security long enough to recognize genuine anger, panic, and deception. Emily displayed none of them. Victoria crossed her arms. Our executive suites are reserved for verified VIP guests. I am the guest, Emily answered softly. Victoria sighed. Miss Carter, continuing this conversation is becoming unnecessary. A ripple of whispers spread through the lobby. A woman standing near the elevators discreetly raised her phone, pretending to answer a message while secretly recording. An older gentleman folded his newspaper completely. Even the pianist seemed to lower the volume of his performance. Embarrassment had become tonight's entertainment. Victoria tapped the counter lightly with one perfectly manicured finger. If you cannot provide acceptable verification, I'm going to ask security to escort you from the executive lobby. Daniel shifted uneasily. Ms. Hayes. She interrupted him. The Lexington Crown has standards. Emily remained silent. Her breathing never changed. Neither did her posture. The composure confused Daniel more than any argument could have. Most people became defensive when challenged in public. Some shouted. Some threatened lawsuits. Others demanded managers. Emily simply stood there as though she had already accepted whatever happened next. Victoria mistook that silence for surrender. You know, she continued, deliberately raising her voice just enough for surrounding guests to hear. People often make online reservations without understanding what they're purchasing. A few quiet chuckles surfaced from somewhere behind the crowd. Victoria noticed them. The reaction encouraged her. The presidential suite isn't something people simply walk into because they clicked a button. Emily answered with remarkable restraint. I understand exactly what I reserved. Victoria smiled thinly. I'm not convinced you do. For several seconds, no one spoke. Crystal light shimmered across the polished floor. Champagne glasses clinked softly from the lounge. Outside, another luxury vehicle rolled beneath the grand entrance canopy, unnoticed by almost everyone inside. Emily slowly reached into her cardigan pocket. Victoria immediately stiffened. If you're looking for a credit card, she said, I'm afraid payment isn't the issue anymore. Emily pulled out her phone. Its screen lit briefly before she typed only 3 words. I'm already here. She pressed send. Nothing else. No explanation. No frantic phone call. No desperate attempt to defend herself. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. Victoria laughed quietly. Calling a friend won't solve this. Emily looked at her. I wasn't calling anyone. The answer lingered strangely in the air. Daniel glanced toward the entrance for reasons he couldn't explain. Something about the atmosphere had shifted. Not visibly. Not logically. Just enough to leave an uncomfortable feeling settling beneath the polished elegance of the lobby. Then the concierge near the revolving doors suddenly straightened. A valet hurried outside. Another employee whispered urgently into a headset. Within seconds, nearly every senior staff member instinctively adjusted their jackets. Victoria frowned. What is everyone doing? Before anyone answered, the massive glass doors rotated once more. 3 impeccably dressed assistants entered first, scanning the lobby without speaking. Behind them walked an elderly gentleman with silver hair, an understated navy suit, and the quiet confidence of someone who never needed to announce his importance. No security introduced him. No employee questioned him. Instead, every member of staff who recognized him immediately stood a little straighter. Daniel's eyes widened. His heartbeat quickened. Because only one person ever received that kind of silent respect inside the Lexington Crown Hotel. And he was walking directly toward the reception desk. The elderly gentleman never hurried. He didn't need to. Every confident step seemed to command the attention of the entire lobby without a single spoken word. Conversations faded. Concierge staff instinctively stood straighter. Bellmen lowered their voices. Even guests who had no idea who he was could sense that someone important had just arrived. Daniel Brooks immediately stepped aside. Good afternoon, Mr. Bennett. The words landed like a stone in still water. Victoria froze. William Bennett, the owner of the Lexington Crown Hotel. She had met him only twice before, both during executive meetings where every manager carefully measured each sentence in his presence. He rarely visited the property without advance notice. Today, no one had expected him. Victoria quickly straightened her jacket and forced her professional smile back into place. Mr. Bennett, welcome. We weren't informed. William acknowledged her with a brief nod, but continued walking. Not toward the executive offices. Not toward the concierge. Toward the young woman standing quietly beside the reception desk. Emily hadn't moved. She watched him approach with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the entire confrontation. The distance between them grew shorter. The lobby became impossibly quiet. Victoria suddenly noticed something she hadn't seen before. Emily wasn't nervous. She wasn't relieved. She looked expected, as though she had known exactly who would walk through those doors. William stopped directly in front of her. For one suspended heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the 70-year-old hotel owner smiled warmly. "Emily." His voice carried genuine affection. "I hope we haven't kept you waiting too long." The silence that followed felt almost physical. Victoria's smile disappeared. Daniel stared in disbelief. Several guests slowly lowered their phones. Emily returned the smile. "Not very long." William glanced toward the reception counter. "I see there has been some confusion." Emily answered carefully. "A misunderstanding." She refused to say anything more. She didn't point fingers. She didn't accuse. She simply protected the dignity of everyone involved, including the woman who had just humiliated her. William's eyes shifted toward Victoria. His expression remained composed, yet the warmth had vanished completely. "Ms. Hayes." Victoria swallowed. "Yes, sir." "Has Miss Carter been checked into the presidential suite?" Victoria searched desperately for the right words. There were concerns regarding the reservation. "What concerns?" Victoria hesitated. The reservation appeared inconsistent with. She stopped herself. William waited. The silence forced her to continue. "With the guest." No one moved. No one spoke. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, while the entire lobby absorbed the meaning of those words. William looked back at Emily, then at the modest suitcase beside her. Finally, he returned his attention to Victoria. "I personally approve this reservation." Victoria felt the color drain from her face. William continued calmly. "I also invited Miss Carter here." Another wave of stunned silence spread across the lobby. One concierge quietly closed his notebook. The pianist stopped playing altogether. Somewhere near the elevators, a champagne glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the marble floor. No one even turned toward the sound. Every eye remained fixed on the reception desk. Victoria's breathing became shallow. I wasn't aware." "No," William replied quietly. "You weren't." His tone never rose. That somehow made it worse. Emily stood perfectly still. She offered neither satisfaction nor triumph. Only patience. William faced the gathered employees. "Miss Carter traveled here because her company is considering a long-term strategic partnership with our hotel group." Several managers exchanged shocked glances. "Our future expansion depends on today's meeting." Victoria's knees felt weak. Only now did she begin connecting the pieces she had ignored. The reservation, the executive notes, the unusual arrival, the extraordinary calm of the young woman she had judged within seconds. She had mistaken simplicity for insignificance. And in doing so, she had nearly embarrassed the most important guest the Lexington Crown would receive all year. The room remained silent, but everyone understood that the real conversation had only just begun. No one in the lobby seemed willing to breathe. The shattered champagne glass remained scattered across the marble floor, yet nobody moved to clean it. Every employee stood frozen. Every guest watched in silence. And every assumption that had filled the room only moments earlier had collapsed beneath the weight of a single truth. William Bennett slowly turned toward Victoria Hayes. "I have a question," he said quietly. His voice never rose. It didn't have to. "At what point did you decide Miss Carter wasn't worthy of the reservation she had already paid for?" Victoria searched desperately for an answer that no longer existed. I believed I was protecting the hotel's standards." William regarded her for several long seconds. "And what standards would those be?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The silence became unbearable. William finally continued. "The Lexington Crown was founded by my father nearly 60 years ago." His eyes swept across the gathered employees. He began as a bellman. Several younger staff members looked at one another in surprise. He owned one suit. His shoes had holes in them. More than once he was refused service because people assumed he couldn't afford the places he entered. William paused. He built this hotel so no honest guest would ever experience that kind of humiliation again. Every word settled heavily across the lobby. Victoria lowered her eyes. Emily remained perfectly still. She had not interrupted once. She had not celebrated. She had simply allowed the truth to reveal itself. William turned toward her with genuine regret. Miss Carter, on behalf of everyone at the Lexington Crown, I sincerely apologize. Emily offered a gentle smile. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I understand this. Experience has been unacceptable. It was disappointing, Emily answered honestly. But disappointment can still become an opportunity. William studied her expression. You still wish to continue today's meeting? Emily nodded without hesitation. My company evaluates people the same way we evaluate businesses. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. We pay close attention to how organizations respond after mistakes. Those words struck far deeper than criticism. William understood immediately. Character wasn't measured by perfection. It was measured by accountability. He inclined his head respectfully. Then allow us to earn back your confidence. Emily looked briefly toward Victoria. The manager's shoulders had lost every trace of confidence she carried only minutes earlier. Her carefully rehearsed authority had disappeared, replaced by the unmistakable weight of regret. Emily could have demanded her dismissal. She could have listed every insulting remark spoken in front of dozens of witnesses. She could have ended someone's career with a single sentence. Instead, she walked one step closer. Ms. Hayes. Victoria slowly looked up. I'm deeply sorry, Miss Carter. I believe you are. Victoria blinked, surprised by the calm response. Emily continued gently. I don't need revenge. The entire lobby listened. I only hope that the next young woman who walks through these doors wearing simple clothes is welcomed before she's judged. No one spoke. Daniel Brooks quietly lowered his head. The concierge swallowed hard. Even several guests who had silently watched the confrontation felt an uncomfortable sense of responsibility. Because they had judged her too. Not aloud, but silently. Emily picked up her modest suitcase. It looked exactly the same as when she had entered the hotel. Only the eyes surrounding it had changed. And in that profound silence, everyone present understood that true luxury had never been found in crystal chandeliers, marble floors, or the presidential suite. It had always begun with the simple decision to treat another human being with dignity. William Bennett personally escorted Emily Carter away from the reception desk. No photographers followed them. No executives rushed to explain themselves. The crowd simply parted in silence, creating a path that had not existed 10 minutes earlier. The same guests who had watched Emily with quiet skepticism now stepped aside with lowered eyes. Respect had arrived, not because her appearance had changed, but because the truth had finally caught up with their assumptions. As they crossed the marble lobby, William slowed his pace. I owe you more than an apology, he said. Emily looked at him calmly. You don't owe me anything you don't truly mean. I do mean it. His voice carried the weight of sincere regret. My father used to tell me that a hotel reveals its character in the first 5 minutes a guest walks through the door. Today, we failed that test. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Every company fails at something eventually. William glanced toward her. The important part is what happens next. A faint smile appeared on Emily's face. Exactly. They entered a private elevator reserved for executive guests. As the polished doors closed, the noise of the lobby disappeared, replaced by quiet classical music and the gentle hum of the ascending lift. For the first time that afternoon, Emily allowed herself to relax. William noticed. You've handled today with remarkable grace. Emily looked at the city skyline through the glass panel. I learned a long time ago that anger rarely changes people's hearts. What does? She answered without hesitation, giving them the opportunity to become better. William remained silent for several seconds. He suddenly understood why investors spoke so highly of the young CEO standing beside him. Leadership wasn't measured by authority alone. Sometimes it appeared in restraint. When the elevator reached the top floor, 2 attendants were already waiting outside the presidential suite. Each stood perfectly still. One opened the handcrafted walnut doors. The suite overlooked Central Park through floor-to-ceiling windows. Afternoon sunlight poured across elegant furniture, fresh white orchids, polished oak floors, and a dining table prepared for an executive meeting. Emily quietly admired the view. It's beautiful. William smiled. My father designed this suite himself. He placed a leather folder on the table. Inside are today's partnership documents. Emily didn't open it immediately. Instead, she walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. I've been considering several hotel groups for this project. William joined her. I know. My board recommended yours because of your reputation. William's expression softened. I hope today hasn't changed your opinion permanently. Emily watched the streets far below. It changed my opinion. William's shoulders tightened. Then she continued, but not in the way you fear. He looked at her. I've learned something very valuable today. What is that? A company's culture isn't revealed when everything goes perfectly. She turned toward him. It's revealed by how its leaders respond when something goes terribly wrong. William slowly exhaled. For the first time since entering the lobby, hope returned to his face. Far below, employees were already speaking quietly about what had happened at the reception desk. Some admitted they should have intervened. Others confessed they had silently judged Emily themselves before learning who she was. One conversation had begun changing an entire workplace. Inside the presidential suite, neither Emily nor William realized that the lesson spreading through the hotel would travel much farther than its marble walls. Because genuine leadership has a way of inspiring people long after the room has fallen silent. The meeting began without lawyers speaking first. That surprised everyone. Around the long walnut conference table sat senior executives from both companies, each surrounded by tablets, financial reports, and carefully prepared presentations. Millions of dollars rested inside the contracts before them. Yet for nearly 5 minutes no one mentioned revenue projections, investment figures, or expansion strategies. Emily Carter quietly closed the presentation folder. I'd like to begin somewhere else. Every eye turned toward her. William Bennett nodded. Please. Emily looked around the room, making brief eye contact with each executive. When companies enter partnerships, they usually evaluate financial strength, market position, and long-term growth. She paused. My company evaluates something else first. Silence settled naturally across the room. We evaluate character. Several executives exchanged thoughtful glances. Emily continued. Buildings can be renovated. Systems can be upgraded. Profits rise and fall. She rested one hand lightly on the table. But culture becomes visible in moments no one plans for. No one interrupted. Today wasn't a planned audit. Her words remained calm, free from accusation. It was simply an ordinary afternoon that revealed something extraordinary. William lowered his eyes. Emily noticed. What impressed me wasn't the mistake. She turned toward him with a gentle smile. It was your willingness to own it immediately. The tension around the table eased almost imperceptibly. One of William's vice presidents finally spoke. Miss Carter, after everything that happened downstairs, most people would have walked away. Emily smiled softly. Many probably should. The room grew quiet again. But leaving would have solved only my problem. She looked toward the hotel executives seated together. Staying gave everyone an opportunity to solve a larger one. Those words landed with unexpected force. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were true. William folded his hands. My father believed every guest teaches a hotel something. Emily nodded. He was right. Outside the conference room, word of the afternoon's events had already spread through nearly every department. Housekeepers spoke about it in service corridors. Bell staff discussed it near the entrance. Young trainees quietly admitted they had never considered how quickly appearance shaped first impressions. One uncomfortable moment had become an unexpected lesson. Inside the meeting room, Emily finally opened the proposal. I still intend to recommend this partnership to my board. Several executives released quiet breaths of relief. But with one additional condition. William met her gaze. Name it. Emily slid a single page across the table. It wasn't a financial amendment. It wasn't a pricing adjustment. At the top, one sentence appeared in bold letters. Every employee deserves annual hospitality training focused on dignity, unconscious bias, and respectful guest interaction. William read the page carefully. Then he signed it without changing a single word. I should have introduced this years ago. Emily smiled. It's never too late to improve. The executives followed with their own signatures one after another. No negotiations. No objections. Only quiet agreement. As the final signature dried, afternoon sunlight stretched across the conference table, illuminating the completed agreement. The partnership was valuable, but everyone in the room understood that the most important document signed that day wasn't the business contract. It was the promise that no future guest would have to prove their worth before being treated with respect. And in that quiet realization, success became about far more than business. 3 weeks later, the Lexington Crown Hotel felt subtly different. The marble floors still gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. The concierge still welcomed diplomats, celebrities, and business leaders with polished professionalism. Luxury had not changed. The people had. Every employee, from the valet at the entrance to the executive managers upstairs, had completed the first phase of the new hospitality program. The sessions contained no lectures about protecting the hotel's reputation. Instead, they focused on something far simpler and far more difficult: seeing people before judging them. William Bennett attended every workshop himself. He refused special treatment. If we're asking our employees to grow, he told the instructors, leadership should be sitting in the front row. Word of that decision spread quickly through the company. So did the story of the young woman with the modest suitcase. No names were posted on bulletin boards. No employee was publicly shamed. The lesson belonged to everyone. One rainy afternoon, Victoria Hayes stood behind the same reception desk where everything had begun. The polished counter looked exactly as it had weeks before, yet she felt like a completely different person. The revolving doors opened. A middle-aged woman entered wearing faded jeans, carrying 2 heavy canvas bags. Her clothes were damp from the rain, and her hair had been hurriedly tied back. Several waiting guests barely looked at her. Victoria did. For one brief moment, memories returned. The assumptions, the embarrassment, the silence that had followed. Then she stepped out from behind the reception desk. "Welcome to the Lexington Crown," she said with genuine warmth. "May I help you with your luggage?" The woman looked surprised. Are you sure?" "Of course." Victoria carried one of the bags herself. The guest smiled with visible relief. It was a small moment, almost invisible, but Daniel Brooks, standing nearby, noticed everything. He quietly smiled to himself. Sometimes real change announced itself with applause. Sometimes it appeared through simple acts no one else thought were important. Later that evening, William reviewed guest feedback from the past month. One comment caught his attention. "Every employee made me feel like I belonged the moment I walked through the door." He read the sentence twice before quietly placing the report aside. Emily Carter received a handwritten letter from William the following morning. Inside was no business proposal, no financial update, only one short message. "Thank you for reminding us what true hospitality looks like." Emily folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her notebook. She smiled, not because she had been proven right, but because the lesson had continued long after she left the hotel. Across the city, thousands of people would pass through the Lexington Crown over the coming years. Most would never hear about the afternoon when a young CEO was denied the presidential suite. They would never know about the mistake. They would only experience the kindness that grew from it. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Because forgiveness does not erase the past. It transforms the future. The Grand Hotel still stood as a symbol of luxury. But those who truly understood its story knew the finest thing it offered was never found inside the presidential suite. It was found in the quiet decision to welcome every stranger with equal dignity before appearances. Had the chance to speak. 1 year later, almost no one remembered the reservation number. No one remembered the exact room rate. Few could even recall the date. But everyone who had witnessed that afternoon remembered how a quiet young woman carrying an ordinary suitcase had transformed an entire hotel without raising her voice. The Lexington Crown had become known for something far more valuable than luxury. Hospitality magazines praised its renewed culture. Business schools used its leadership response as a case study in organizational accountability. Guest satisfaction reached its highest level in the hotel's history. Not because the chandeliers shined brighter or the suites became larger, but because every visitor felt respected from the moment they entered the revolving doors. William Bennett often smiled when reading those reports. Whenever someone congratulated him, he answered the same way. "The credit belongs to a guest who reminded us what we had forgotten." Emily Carter never asked for recognition. Her company continued expanding across the country, forming partnerships built on trust rather than prestige alone. During interviews, journalists occasionally asked what qualities she looked for in business relationships. Her answer never changed. "I invest in people before I invest in buildings." Those words quietly traveled through boardrooms far beyond New York. As for Victoria Hayes, she chose not to leave the Lexington Crown. She chose something more difficult. She stayed. Every new employee assigned to the reception desk spent one afternoon shadowing her. She taught reservation procedures. She explained guest privacy. She demonstrated professional etiquette. Then, before every training session ended, she would pause. Without mentioning names, she shared the story of one ordinary afternoon when assumptions nearly cost the hotel everything that truly mattered. Some trainees expected a dramatic ending. Instead, Victoria always finished with the same sentence. The easiest mistake you'll ever make is judging someone before you've welcomed them. No one forgot those words. Years passed. Guests came and went. The marble floors reflected thousands of hurried footsteps. Children who once entered holding their parents' hands returned as adults. Business leaders retired. New managers took their places. Yet the quiet lesson born in the lobby never disappeared. One autumn evening, a young receptionist noticed an elderly man entering the hotel, wearing faded work clothes and carrying a small duffel bag. Without hesitation, she stepped from behind the desk. "Welcome to the Lexington Crown," she said warmly. "May I help you?" The old man smiled with grateful surprise. From across the lobby, Victoria watched the interaction. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The lesson had become part of the culture. It no longer belonged to one person. It belonged to everyone. Some stories end when justice is served. This one didn't. It continued every time a stranger was greeted with kindness instead of suspicion. Every time dignity came before appearance. Every time someone chose compassion over assumption. Because true greatness is rarely revealed by wealth, titles, or the room someone reserves. It is revealed by how we treat people whose stories we have not yet heard. And somewhere, in a hotel lobby filled with crystal light and polished marble, a simple welcome continued, changing lives in ways no one could measure. The presidential suite was never the most valuable room inside the Lexington Crown. The most valuable place was always the space between one human being's first impression and their decision to choose respect instead. And on that unforgettable day, everyone learned what real luxury had looked like all along.